Vincent was one of the first Innovative Prize winners. Now he's a senior member of one of the senior members of SwissNet. So he's speaking on Russo-Seymour-Welch theory for planar percolation.
Okay. Okay, so thank you very much, Fontaine, and thanks more generally to all the organizers for the conference and the invitation. And as Anton mentioned, I've been part of the program from the very beginning, and I've benefited a lot from the program, so thanks a lot for all the work. And also thanks for all the logistics. I think it's my first hybrid conferences. The first 2 days I attended from my living room. And so I'm happy to be here for the third day to see what's happening on the other side of the camera. So the topic of today is quite almost, I would say, emotional for me. Russo-Seymour-Welch theory, which I've been like hooked to probability basically thanks to this theory. Comes back to when I was a student in Lyon. And when I learned about that, about with percolation, the proof was presented by my professor who became my PhD advisor later, Vincent Blefara, and he presented a proof of something which looks very intuitive, which is the Russo-Seymour-Welch theorem that I will discuss today. This is exactly this kind of math proof which are really cool, because you see it's super intuitive. Definitely it's true. You don't doubt it. You're not looking for something which is true or wrong, like you know it's true. Like there is no question. Just you want to find the rigorous proof. And it's actually, if you just try by yourself, you don't find it. And then when someone presents the proof, it's, yeah, it's obvious. It's exactly this kind of magic that happen in math. And actually, I learned later, actually, 2 years ago, that this proof was due to stats. So, that's really how it started. So I was very happy. It was very beautiful, but I was also very frustrated. And that's because somehow this proof was very beautiful, but very restricted to one specific model, which is Bernoulli percolation, and I will discuss today. And I got this frustration all over the years. I mean, I worked and I tried to generalize this theorem. I worked on this during my PhDs and postdocs, and we made many progress, which led to nice results. But the kind of essence was still like the minimal assumption were not there. So, and just what I will talk about today is something that happened like a few months ago when we had a lot of time at home, and finally with my PhD students, we finally proved the Russo-Seymour-Welch I was somehow looking for 15 years ago.
Can you just turn on the mic?
Yes.
Just about one.
It's written on. Now it's better? Now?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's it.
Better?
Yes.
Okay. So that was for the story, but just before starting the talk, let me just say a few words about the topic, which is percolation theory, which is a mathematical framework to study propagation of a fluid in a porous or in a random environment. So two examples, one in ecology and one in geology, like percolation can be used to study propagation of water in a porous stone, or let's say propagation of a fire in a forest. And in these two type of in these two examples, we observe the same. Oh, there is a transition, another phase transition. In these two examples, we observe the same kind of phase transition. So in the first case, if I plunge one of these stones into water, either the stone is not porous, and basically the water will stay at the surface of the stone, or the stone is sufficiently porous, and the water will penetrate and reach the center of the stone, which is basically what will happen on the right. The same for a forest fire. The forest is very sparse there will be no propagation of the fire. And if the forest starts to be dense enough, then the fire will propagate and burn all the forest. The most simple example for percolation is Bernoulli percolation, so that I will describe it. This will be the main model I want to discuss in detail today. So I will spend time to define it properly. So we have a parameter P. This parameter P will represent somehow the porosity of the medium. And today I just want to discuss the square lattice, E2. So what we do, we will look at all the edges one after the other, and we will toss a coin, and we will declare an edge to be open with probability P and closed with probability 1 minus P, and I repeat the experiment for every edge. So I look at the first edge, I toss a coin, second edge, I toss a coin, and I repeat the experiment for all the edges independently, and what I end up with is what we call a percolation configuration. So this is my random environment. Just something about the terminology, open and close. You can think of the vertices of Z2 as small holes, and an open edge between two holes means that the water or the fluid can flow between these two holes. It's called Bernoulli percolation because it's made from the mathematical side just as IID independent Bernoulli random variables. And we will denote by P sub P the law of this random configuration of medium. So by extension to open edges, we're interested in open path. An open path will be just a path made of open edges where like water can flow. And a cluster will be just a connected component of our random graph. So here on the picture, you have an example of cluster. Typically, you can imagine if you inject some water in a point, the cluster will be the region invaded by water. And a typical question, so I mentioned phase transition, and the phase transition occurs when we ask ourselves if there is an infinite cluster in the resulting configuration. Maybe. I will do it on the other. And of course, the answer depends on P, so let's draw an axis. So if I am here, when P is equal to 0, what happens is that all the edges are closed, so that definitely there is no infinite cluster. When P is equal to 1, I have the square, like all the edges are open, and I have an infinite cluster, which is just the whole lattice. And what happens in between is that there is a critical parameter, PC, and below this parameter, there is all the clusters are finite. And it's an anomalistic event, it occurs with probability 1. Whatever the sampling, I will always have only finite limit clusters, finite clusters, not finite limit. And if P is larger than PC, all the time, what I will observe is that I will observe a unique infinite cluster. So this corresponds to this phase transition I mentioned at the beginning. You have a drastic change of behavior, whether the value of P is below this critical parameter PC or above.
Sorry, you're saying this means there's probability 1.
Exactly. This is really with probability 1, like I'm on the whole lattice, so these are like somehow, you can see them as like, there are ways to see that they are invariant events, and then just by a simple ergodic theorem, for example, you can see that the probability of this is either 0 or 1, and the same for this kind of things. Let's look at simulation. So here I just made a simulation of the biggest cluster in a box. So if I sample P smaller than PC, I will see that if you repeat it, actually, if I take a box of size n, the biggest cluster will be typically of order log n, so it will be typically very small. When P is larger than PC, then you see this infinite big cluster that appear, macroscopic structure. maybe when you see these two pictures, you will trust me, and this will be useful later. That if you look, let's say, at a big square of size n, when p is larger than pc, you have like all the clusters are small, and if you look at the probability, it's okay if I talk sufficiently loud. It's not. Are people in the back hear me? Because I really struggle with the base transition of the distance. And please tell me if for the video it's okay. Huh?
Yes, because you have the other one.
Okay. So please complain, don't hesitate if I start to lower my voice. So just here, if I look at the probability to cross from zero to from left to right, let's say to have a cluster that crosses from left to right, like the biggest cluster is always very small. So basically, this as n goes to infinity, this will go to 0. And if I look at this probability when p is larger than c, then this time, oops, I spoiled. And this time the probability will go to 1. Like you have this big infinite cluster, so this is quite actually difficult to prove rigorously, but at least you can trust me on that. What I want to talk about today is what happened at criticality, and that you have some kind of nice scale invariance, and you start to look very nice fractal structure that emerge. And basically the goal in percolation is to try to describe this fractal structure that appears. And Russo-Semmelweis theory is somehow one of the most basic tools that we can come up with to study this property. So this is the kind of object we want to understand. Other questions so far about Bernoulli percolation? What we're gonna do? So of course I introduced Bernoulli percolation, and I said something which would be why it's nice, why we would like to talk about different models, that percolation arises in many different fields. As soon as you have an random environment and you study the propagation of something in this environment. So their general, natural generalization is that when you don't start from a lattice, but you, let's say, start from something which is already a random object. So here, if you start from a random tiling, for example, is a model called Voronoi percolation. So you color red or white some cells of some random network. More interestingly, in statistical mechanics, and this had a huge impact in the last years, at least in the rigorous study of spin system, is that you can see a spin system also as a random environment. And what is propagating in a spin system is information. Basically, you want to know when you have a spin system, think of, for example, Ising model, whether the information will traverse your system and go from one point to another. And there are actually rigorous tools to analyze that. We can represent this spin system into a percolation model, which somehow represents the information. And this phase transition of percolation can be then transferred into the phase transition of, let's say, alignment of speeds. Like the information will manage to percolate in my media. And this correspondence has been particular. The one I mentioned with Pesquet percolation was introduced by Fortuyn and Castelli. And in particular, if we make progress in percolation and general percolation, then we get new results, potential new results in the study of spin system. For people who like fields, also you can try to understand fields, you can describe them like a field, just as, let's say, if I look at the field on a lattice, I can associate a number to every vertex, and I can represent my field, like we do on a map, by just looking at its level lines. And the level line, let's say I look at the value which are above some altitude, h, and below, then I get again a percolation model. And somehow the percolation property of my model here will maybe, like if I manage to get some property of this model, I can also get some information on my field. So these have been a quite active area in the field of GFF percolation, the study of nodal lines, just to spike names. But there is a nice motivation, their nice motivation to try to have a very general theory of percolation, because when you understand well, you can then extend the theory to in other directions. And the part of the theory I want to discuss today is the Rousseau-Seymour theory, which was proved for Bernoulli percolation in 1778 in 2 independent works by Rousseau, Seymour, and Welch. I will present the theory for Bernoulli percolation, and we have a solid framework, we can talk easily. And then in the second part, depending on, I should finish 12:30, right? So I will try to present the extension of this theory to more dependent models. But let's first start with the Rousseau-Seymour theory. First, I would like to maybe say an important theorem is that on Z2, the square lattice, the model I've described so far, we know the value of PC. And it's very rare. Basically, in general, we don't care about this value. It's just like a critical temperature or something. It's something that's given by nature. But in this case, nature gave us even a value, which is 1/2. So when actually these two pictures that I have shown you is like when P is a sample P smaller than 1/2, there is no percolation. All the clusters are finite. And when P is larger than 1/2, we have an infinite cluster. What happened at 1/2 here? And we have a very nice mathematical explanation why it's a critical value is that there is the square lattice has some property that if we look at percolation on the square lattice, it is at 1/2 self-dual. What do I mean by that? Let's look at this piece. Yes?
So this is a little bit of a naive question in a sense. As you say, I can expect that if the probability is lower than PC, I have this behavior, and higher I have that behavior.
Yeah.
Do I notice anything between different values of P's? Like in between the clusters, the forms, or
yes,
something?
so they are basically it's very interesting what happens when you approach PC and when you have, let's say, P smaller than PC, you have this notion of correlation length, which is basically the size of the cluster, big cluster that you see. And you have somehow the picture when you have P smaller than PC, above the correlation length, you see nothing, everything is disconnected, and below the correlation length, you see exactly as at PC. And this is really it's actually very interesting to look at what happens as P varies, and in particular, as P approaches PC, you start to see power law in the value of in these physical quantities, like particular the correlation length and this kind of thing. So it was not at all a naive question. It's actually a very important part of the theory. Question. So let me just now explain why PC equal 1/2 on Z2. So we look at this piece of the square lattice, and what I will do is that I will associate to every edge an orthogonal edge, which just draws this edge orthogonally, and what I end up with is what we call the dual graph. And it's exactly here what we observe, that it's just a copy of my initial graph, just rotated and slightly translated. The same. And now if I have a percolation configuration on my, and to every edge I have a bijection, and I have a dual edge which is associated to it. And if I have a percolation configuration on my original graph, I can just consider another percolation configuration graph on my dual graph by declaring an edge open on the dual graph if it was closed on the original one. And so what we see is that there is a very nice property here that if I'm looking at the existence of a path from left to right, I have a path from left to right in the initial graph, if and only if I have no path from top to bottom in the dual graph, and reciprocal. And what you see that when P is equal to 1/2, so this is for general P, and then either I have a path from left to right in the red picture, or a path from top to bottom in the blue picture. I have this very nice duality in dimension 2. And you see that P equal 1/2 plays a particular value, because if I take P equal 1/2, blue and red, they have the same law. So these two quantities, these two probabilities, they are equal. So they must be equal to 1/2. That's the only possibility at every scale n. So now once you have understood that, like for every, if I take a big square, whatever the the scale I am, I do my percolation, and I will have a probability 1/2 to find a path from left to right. Now, if you look at this picture, the only place where it can happen is at PC. Because below it should go to 0, above it should go to 1. So if I found a place where I see some kind of observation like that, I mean, some kind of non-trivial behavior at every scale, I am at the critical point. Any questions?
Yes. So you said that percolation was started since the late 50s. How come it took till the 80s to find this out?
So this argument was actually known from the beginning. The part which is difficult to prove rigorously is this part. That somehow I discussed that with Das, is that why does this, as n grows, move from, you have some kind of a finite version of the 0-1 law for this event. And that's really super intuitive. Now we have very very short proofs of that. But the first proof of it was proved by Kesten rigorously in the 80s. It took already 20 years. And then now to get to the full understanding and to understand that for general model, the one I mentioned, it has been done in the last 10 years. So somehow understand rigorously this kind of picture is a tricky part.
So the fact that it's a self-dual point, it was known to
Yes.
everyone. And by this, it's clear that in most models, self-dual point will be critical. But mathematical proof, and in one direction, the inequality is obvious, that at this point you have large clusters. But in the other direction, it took some years, and like many people were involved, and you can construct artificial models where self-dual point is not critical. So it's a non-empty question.
And actually, it's very related to what I will talk after. But it's exactly what I meant at the beginning. This kind of question are appealing because you don't doubt. I mean, if I tell you PC equal 1/2, it's over. Like now, basically, it's really the rigorous proof that now we want to look for the rigorous argument. There is this kind of still a gap.
So, you know, there is this board game which is played on hexagonal edge square, where in terms you put blue and red edges, and the person who makes connection with his direction wins. And this game uses to be define this observation that exactly one person will win. So in Princeton University Common Room, there is a board of this game made by John Nash and Conway or Nash.
No, it's Nash.
Conway.
It's Nash. It's Nash. But it has been invented before, and Nash rediscovered it.
Yeah. So it was made like in 51 or 49, something very long ago. So that was not.
Okay. So now let's just turn to a more general question, which is, I will introduce a very important concept, which is the concept of crossing probability. So for that, let's just consider a rectangle with some aspect ratio at scale n. So we have seen particular rectangles which are just squares, but let's just generalize them and let's just consider general rectangle. And what we call a crossing probability is a probability that there is a path from left to right at some at scale n of a rectangle of aspect ratio lambda. So these objects are the kind of object I want to use to describe the critical phase. I give you a rectangle, and I want to know if there is, what is the probability that I cross this. And you see it encodes well the geometry. If I know this for different lambda, for example, like big lambda is the probability to have a very thin cluster, small lambda is just the probability to be crossed for easy aspect ratio. And there is a conjecture, which is still a conjecture, is that if I now don't take lambda equal 1, but just any lambda, then this crossing probability, if I'm at 1/2, it should converge. It should converge to a function that just depends on lambda. And this is again something very quite intuitive. I mean, I know it like from the square f of lambda for lambda equal 1, we have just proved that it's equal to 1/2. And what we would like to understand is that, okay, now if I take different aspect ratio, it should just converge, and this is still open. So there are many commands we can do on that. Is that this limit should be non-trivial. Like as soon as I am at criticality, the crossing probability is never degenerate. At every scale, I have a cluster that grows and dies. It's universal, and you see here there is what we mean by universal is that here I define Bernoulli percolation for on the square lattice, but I could have started as a Stas and with another model as the one mentioned by Stas. I could start with just coloring hexagons red and blue, so which correspond to the triangular lattice. I could take another lattice which is somehow sufficiently invariant. It should be the same limit as soon as I take percolation at criticality. There are good explanations for that, but maybe I mention later about. Another property, and here I mean to mention this, I need to generalize a bit, is the conformal invariance property. If I don't take a rectangle, but just maybe a conformal map of this lambda by one rectangle somewhere, so I take just a generalized rectangle, the limit should be the same. So in this sense, the model should enjoy a conformal invariance property. And all this nice property, and in particular this convergence, has been proved, and it's the deep result of Stas in 2001. It has been proved from one case, so it's not bond percolation on the square lattice, but for side percolation on the triangular lattice. I think it's why you prefer hexagons, but you would like to like squares too, right? So this is this was a very major breakthrough. It was the first model for which it could be proved rigorously, and from there, like there is all the machinery that came, mainly, for example, using SLE techniques and so on, that lead also to computation of critical exponents. So the one also then later how the behavior P approach PC. But for example, if you look at the probability from of a path from 0 to distance n, this should this case like a power law, and this power is also given as minus 5 over 48. So this was the result of Loller, Schramm, and Werner using SLE. But this is a story for the triangular lattice, and I started with the square lattice. I want to stay on the square lattice. And there is a nice theorem, and this is the one due to Russo, Seymour, Weiss, that at least they didn't prove convergence, but they proved that this crossing probability are not degenerated. Whatever the scale, there is a constant such that whatever the scale, whatever the aspect ratio, I am bound. No, if I fix my aspect ratio, whatever the scale, I'm bounded away uniformly from 0 and 1. So it's not as strong as convergence. We don't have scale invariance in some sense, but we already have non-triviality, that something is happening at every scale. And basically any analysis of, and that's why we understand quite well two-dimensional percolation, is somehow based at some point on this result. This Russo, Seymour, Weiss. It's really a building block of the theory and of the study of critical percolation. As an application, I said, like, if we know the nice conformal, like the convergence, we can compute exponents. If we know the Seymour theory, we can get bounds on exponents. At least we know that these exponents, like here, for example, if I look at the probability that there is a path from 0 to distance n, I know using this that it decays polynomially, and I will give the argument for that, because I think it's very nice. It explains this polynomial decay is really typical from a fractal behavior. And I think in percolation, we understand, for people who study critical system, you see polynomial algebraic decay everywhere. And in percolation, we have this polynomial decay has a very nice geometric interpretation. It says something happened at every scale. And I will explain this. I will explain this up above. Another application, and that's related to the question that I was asked, is when you have Russo, Seymour, Weiss, you can very well understood the notion of correlation length, and you can somehow use this crossing probability to relate the critical regime to the near critical regime. So this has been a major work by Kesten in the 80s, who used this Russo-Seymour theory to somehow bridge a gap between the understanding of the critical exponent when you approach PC and what happened at PC. So this is a very these are two applications among many. I just want to illustrate a bit, and maybe to illustrate a bit more, I will explain this up above. The question, yeah.
And well, not naive question, but maybe in simple words you can give an intuition. Why is it possible to? Why is it easier with a triangular lattice and respect to rectangular lattice?
This, I think the very deep answer is that it's like many things in math. They're like not very good answer. Like in one case, TAS found something very cool, which I call observable, which have holomorphic properties at the microscopic level. In the square lattice, they exist too, but they are not as nice. So there is no, there is a tool that is missing, and somehow there is a tool that at a discrete level has already this conformal invariance property. But somehow it's frustrating, and because it should not be the explanation for that. It should be the fact that you have some scale invariant that you can, but still the reason is that in the triangular lattice, these objects exist. Like you can have somehow this hint of like this conformal invariance exists already at the discrete level, and then these objects converge to holomorphic object in the continuum, and in the square lattice we don't have them as with such nice property.
So
yeah, but maybe it's
yeah, they are also approximate. So there is some discrete coamorphic function on a triangular lattice, which was approximate at the time, but now we have a new group where it's exactly discrete.
It's exactly.
And on square, it's probably approximately coamorphic, but we cannot estimate the error. So the other nice development is the same thing in the Ising model. It basically works for any lattice. So we found a similar function, which is just a coamorphic fermion. Here it's a coamorphic logarithmic. Well, it's more like a Poisson derivative, so it's logarithmic observable. But in Ising, it works for L graphs. Here it works only for this and some combinatorial miracle.
Yeah.
So, but for that, it's everyone understands that in the limits coamorphic, but we don't know how to prove it.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Thanks. So let me just, again, now let me just, I say I want to explain this up above. So for that, if I use the Rousseau-Samuel theorem, let me just give a nice consequence. Now I go to the dual, and I say, if I look at an annulus from n to 2n, by gluing long rectangle, I can also construct this dual circuit. At every scale, there is a constant probability that I have somehow a dual circuit that crosses this annulus. So you remember this duality, these blue guys are the one who block the red path. And at every scale, I have a positive chance to have something like that. By the way, if you follow the proof, I think I made the computation. I remember because I attended to the talk of Nicolas Gissin on Monday, where he said like things like cusonics and they don't make a lot of sense physically. I think here, giving sense to this constant at the physical level is quite hard. I mean, typically you will never see this in life if this was the truth. So, but for us it's good. It's a constant that does not depend on it. And I mean, as soon as the theory goes, this constant they get worse and worse. So I think it's quite nice to remind that we're just here. Like mathematically, it's nice to have a constant, but physically it can be very small if we just follow the rigorous truth. But let's say now we have this estimate, and now imagine you start at the origin and you want to go to distance n. You can decompose your box of size n into log n annuli. So, and how many annuli you need to cross? You need to cross this log n annuli. And each of these annuli, so if I want to go from 0 to distance n, I must find no blocking circuit. And each time I reach a new annulus, I have a positive chance to be blocked. So if I look at the first one, I have this constant C. By constant C, I am blocked by a dual splice. If I arrive to the next one, by a constant C, I am blocked, and so on and so forth. So to manage to reach the distance n, I need to fail. I need to somehow succeed in breaking this annuli log 2n times. So you see, you get 1 minus C to the power log 2n, which gives me this polynomial bound. And what I like here is that there is really some kind of, this polynomial decay of 1R is really something characteristic, that there is something happening at every scale, and that they are log n scale. On the other hand, you can also use the Russo-Semmelweis theory, I can leave it as an exercise, to prove that you also have polynomial lower bound. This time what you will do, you will just glue clusters together, and at each scale you have a positive chance to find one. So that's a typical application of Russo-Semmelweis theory, and I think it's exactly illustrate that you have this kind of quasi-scale invariance, which gives very nice results. But this very nice theory was relying on a lemma. And the lemma I will mention later is, the goal is to, we know that we cross squares with probability 1/2. So the idea is just to generalize to more general rectangles. And this is the proof I mentioned at the beginning of my talk. And the proof of this lemma, due to Rousseau in the 80s, used very, very strongly that Bernoulli percolation is a very independent model. If I take two edges, like the behavior is completely independent. This is a very, very strong property. And all the model I mentioned, like if you take level line of Gaussian fields, if you take correlation in spin models, they don't have this strong independence property. So the Russo-Semmelweis theory was not valid, but could not be proved rigorously for these models. That's maybe what I want to present is progress toward. So first, what the Russo-Semmelweis lemma, what is the key lemma, the heart of the argument, and how we can generalize it. Before that, I would like to discuss two important properties of the Bernoulli percolation that we will discuss. So I just introduce some terminologies here just for the sake of the talk. They're not the standard terminology. But I will just say my measure is symmetric in the sense that if I take any symmetry, so if I translate my configuration, if I rotate my configuration, or if I reflect it, I have the same law. Just completely obvious from Bernoulli percolation. And from that, I will just say that the percolation that I'm studying is symmetric. That's what when I say symmetric, it's what I mean. I am invariant under the symmetries of the lattice. Another nice property, and here I just gave an application, is that you have positive correlations. So there is a nice theory which is called the Hardy-Cerquet inequality, that increasing events are positively correlated. So for us here, I don't want to give the general framework. What we have is just that crossing events are positively correlated. If I know that some box is crossed somewhere, it will help another box to cross at somewhere else. And this already has nice applications, so I will just give you this application on the board. Yes, do it here. So I will prove this, the fact that we can easily relate 2n by n box with 3n by n using these two properties. So let's say I want to build a 3n by n crossing. What I can do is that I will say that it's larger than the probability of the following thing. So I will somehow I can use these things as Legos. So here I have a first rectangle, and there are 2n by, this one is 2n, and this is 3n. And one way to realize this 3n by n crossing is to say, oh, I have a left-right crossing in these 2n by n rectangles. I also have another one in this one. It does not imply the 3n by n crossing because maybe they miss each other. But if I ask a crossing here as well, then they must be connected. And that's just, I mean, the magic of Jordan, or the planarity that things in the plane curves intersect. So here I used a lot that I am in 2D. That's basically, this lemma is the reason why we understand so much better 2D than 3D. If you think of this in 3D, this is wrong. Simply, you don't have a way to connect paths. In 2D, you can do that. And now I can use the fact that these crossings, they are positively correlated. So this is larger than the probability of the first, times the probability of the second, times the probability of the third one. And now by symmetry, they all are the same. So this is equal to the probability Q. And this is symmetry. And here I used positive correlation. Okay, so these two properties are very nice, and they are very nice properties of a percolation measure, and they appear to be very general. Basically, the model I presented at the beginning, they all also satisfy these two properties. Invariance, symmetries, you can imagine less, but at least they're very general. It's not the strong independent that I mentioned. Now, let's say we want to prove Rousseau-Semmelweis theorem. So we want to prove for, let's say, for Bernoulli percolation, how does the proof work? Let's say I just want to prove the lower bound for some long aspect ratio. I have a starting point, which is given by some property, the fact we know we have a criticality, we have seen in our model. In this case, it's self-duality. For other model, you have to find something else, but you have to find an indication that you are critical. In this case, we know the square. Then there is a step 2, a jump steps. If I know for lambda equal 2, I'm done, because I can repeat this argument. As soon as I have a 2n by n Lego, I can use, here it's, when I mean FKG is the other name of positive correlation. As soon as I have a bound on the 2n by n Lego, I have it for every long lambda. Just I can repeat this, this very nice Lego playing argument. So the missing step, which is the key step, the Rousseau-Semmelweis lemma, is to move from the squares to the rectangle. And now you can start to play, if you want to play with Lego, you try to move your square around, you will never manage to put square crossing in a way that you manage to build this guy. You can try to do, I mean, I don't know, I think the pile of papers I used to try to find construction, and I'm not exaggerating, is really full of, yeah, trying this very elementary topology, you play with simple crossing, you try to glue them, you always fail. You always find somehow, somewhere they can avoid it so that you don't manage to do that. So this is the key lemma. The key lemma is, so forget about the, here I just want to say what we would like to prove for a general model. So a general model is just a percolation model in the plane somewhere, a model where I can define crossing probability. So you can think of Bernoulli percolation as I introduced, FK percolation, which is related to spin system, or Voronoi percolation that I mentioned before. And we say that we have a Rousseau-Semmelweis lemma. If I know a bound on the square, I can deduce a bound on the 2n by n rectangle. This is what I want to call a Rousseau-Semmelweis lemma. And as I mentioned, this has been proved for Bernoulli percolation in the 80s. The proof I mentioned due to Smirnov, and it uses a very nice self-duality argument. So this one I mentioned at the beginning. So actually it's 2001, it was presented 3 minutes at the end of the talk, if I understood correctly the history. Then for FK percolation, there was some work and some progress. So Hugo Duminil-Copin and Vincent Beffara proved the first version of the Rousseau-Semmelweis result. And we really developed all the Russo-Samuel theory in a paper later in 15, which led us to understanding rigorously the order of the phase transition for Potts model as it was conjectured by Baxter. So this was actually a very nice series of work which led to rigorous computation of critical point and also a rigorous framework to understand prediction of Baxter. And in 2006, by Bolobach and Riordan, a weak version of Russo-Samuel, so not this one, but a weaker one, was proved. And in 2016, during my PhD, I obtained this Russo-Samuel lemma for Voronoi percolation. So relaxing somehow each time a bit the assumptions. In this case, we don't need big independence, but some kind of coarse independence that is sufficiently valid. And this progress in the theory really led to nice results in other fields, as I mentioned at the beginning. And all these proofs, I mean, they're different. Here, I put some colors because somehow the philosophy of the proof are a bit different. Like the green one involves self-duality properties. The brown one are really the one which works for Bernoulli percolation, the original one. The red one involves a nice, and it's a very nice argument which was invented by Bolobach and Riordan, is to somehow use renormalization. With the fact that if I understand or if I manage to relate the crossing from one scale to another, I manage to get rid of some extremal case. So it's a very powerful argument invented by Bolobach and Riordan in 2006. And I also, like the proof I did was also based on that in 2016. But all the proofs, they're quite different. And they all rely on symmetries plus positive correlation plus something else. Then there is a natural question, which was the one, I mean, this just, if I know I can cross rectangle, squares, can I cross rectangle? That's typical thing. And are these two properties I mentioned sufficient or not? And so finally, this is the result we obtained like beginning of this year. If you take a measure just satisfying these two properties, the Russo-Samuel lemma is true. So as soon as you are just positively correlated and you have the symmetries, if you cross square, you cross rectangle. There is no necessity for any independence properties. So I will not have the time to discuss the proof. It's more in this idea that using somehow a renormalization type idea. But I would just maybe rather like to explain why these hypotheses are very natural and what kind of counterexample we had to deal with all the time. It's kind of natural to come up with a model where squares are crossed, but like horizontal squares are crossed, but the rectangle are not. Just let's take this deterministic stair configuration. So I have just half of the edges which are open, half which are closed. It's deterministic, no randomness at all. If I look at a square, I always cross them. I will always find a path that goes from left to right. But as soon as I take a rectangle, somehow I have a dual blocking stairs blocking me and I will never cross the rectangle. So here, on this configuration, which is deterministic, but I want something very general. So I have to deal with this kind of person. Long rectangle are never crossed, but squares are crossed. And you have to understand that this is not the case in a model which is symmetric. What is failing here in this model? Yes, I don't have reflection symmetry. This model is not reflection invariant. So now let's just try to cook a model from this one, which would be reflection invariant. I just take with probability 1/2 this pair, and with probability 1/2 the other one. Now I am fully invariant, symmetry, and so on. Or maybe we need to, maybe there is a small subtle, but let's just take this model. Now I have reflection invariance. square are always crossed, long rectangle are never crossed. But this time, you have no positive correlation. Because, for example, if I know, for example, that, let's say, these two edges are open, I know I am in this configuration, so I know this one cannot be open. So this model has no positive correlation. So these two hypotheses are somehow important to have the property. So this is a missing point. Okay. So I was joking a bit when I was talking about this result because I was hoping I would never give this talk because it was really my favorite problem to think of. This kind of, you cross squares and you prove that you cross rectangle using only these two hypotheses. And I was, this was the thing I was bringing always in vacation, I mean, this kind of things. And so in some sense, I'm very happy to present it, but it's also a bit sad. I have some part of my, like, I was really hooked by this, like, this problem. So, but fortunately, there are still, like, very nice perspectives. And thing we can think of is that, or I can think of like is like I presented the Russo-Sem-Welch for positively correlated models. You can also there are models which are non-positively correlated but should satisfy this property. Like if you take, for example, like some level line of a field, they are not positively correlated because you have white around. So you should find some kind of a very general result as well to somehow replace this positive correlation. And there are like really many, if you take a loop soup model, loop soup in general, they are not positively correlated because the loop, there is this non-intersection constraint. But they should satisfy still this Russo-Sem-Welch theorem. So what is the kind of good hypothesis? What is a good Russo-Sem-Welch theory when you don't have positive correlation? So this one is maybe more for Stas, like prove Cardis formula, let's say for the square lattice. That would be like a very nice perspective. So to understand, not that they are bounded, but they really converge. That would be somehow this. We have a good unified theory of Russo-Sem-Welch theory. Now, why the limit should be the same for a large family of models? So which is my third point, the universality and the fact that all these models satisfy scaling limit. And a very, very challenging question is to do something like that in dimension 3. And let's say I give you a cross cubes, can you cross a long parallelepiped? This time the main problem, even this argument fails. Like you can easily imagine that you have a path, but in dimension 3, like they avoid easily each other. So, and these two parts are really like the far, how to say that, the holy grail, like the kind of vision, like in percolation, they're really two important goals. Try to understand what happened in dimension 3 at criticality. And in dimension 3, we don't even know that there is no infinite cluster RPC. Really, there is nothing at criticality. And in dimension 2, it would be to really have a general picture and really understand why all these models belong to the same universality class. Okay. So, merci beaucoup, merci Filmal. So before, since I was the last speaker, I think it's nice that I say like a great thank you to all the organizers, and all the setup and so on. So I think maybe we should upload.
Any questions or comments?
So you had this ridiculously small constant c, and you said that this is what came out of this RSW theorem.
Yeah.
What's the actual value? I mean,
so here, it's not bad. It's actually given by some formula, some hypergeometric functions. So maybe you know by heart. The two, there is a nice way to compute them. Is that you take your rectangle, it's a lambda by 1. You map it to So you take these 4 points, you take a conformal map, and you map these two to this one. Let's say these two to this one. So this is a conformal mapping. And then the probability to cross here, we just given, so it's a 1, it's just given by x here. And something like that. That's true. So you have actually an exact, so you see on the triangle, the probability to cross from here to here is this x. And then you can get a good intuition. So of course, in this sense, also Semmelweis is really purely theoretical too. Because the constants we get are really far from reality.
So this formula was unrigorously derived by John Carty, and what he did, he moved the 4th point, and then he observed that there is a physical meaning both to crossing probability and its derivative, and he got the Carty equation, which we just saw an hour ago, and the solution is a hypergeometric function. And then Leonard Harbison observed that it's the same hypergeometric function which is Schwarzschild mapping to the triangle. I mean, we all know that, but it took Carlson to observe it. So it's, and then we got this very, very cute formula, and it's not the reason why it works on exact on triangular lattice and on square lattice. It's just coincidence. It just because says that the parameter c equal to 0 in conformal field theory. If you write as a different parameter mu, it is exponent of I pi over 3. But that's why it's. So, for example, using the similar formula, we take nice formula and the triangle. I think it's 45 degrees. So it's, but yeah. But it gets you the idea of the order. So
Yeah.
idea of the order.
Okay. More questions?
About universality and scaling limit, I'm just wondering how easy or difficult it is to make connections with transport in 2D or 3D, and for instance, many-body localization lengths and this type of.
Sorry,
So, you know, in transport in 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions, there are this many-body localization lengths and well, phenomena with some scaling, you know, which are typical. And so I'm wondering if you, well, if you plan to, if
this I have no, I don't know.
Of research or
No, I don't know. Maybe I have no idea about these connections.
I guess it will not be like based on the Bernoulli percolations, because probably you do not have like randomness in choosing your P, or you maybe have some constraints on the P. I don't know.
Here you have to find a way that you have a PC, that's for sure. But no, I don't know what the relation.
Okay. If there are no more questions, thanks again.